This video is to help you as reminders as you go through finding soil texture by feel, just what the steps are when you're working in the field to determine soil texture. So your first step is to get your soil sample and remove any of the organics or the large sediments that are not consistent with the actual soil sample. So just clean that out because that will cause inconsistencies. And that looks better. Next step is how much sand do we have? Is it greater than 50% or less? To find that, just take a small sample of soil, put it in the palm of your hand and rub together to dry it out. The friction will dry the soil. Depending on how moist it is, this may take more time or less time. This sample was already fairly dry, so I'm just drying it in my hand and breaking up all of the peds, the little clumps that you may see. They're going to cause inconsistencies as well, so break all of those up. And when it's done, you should have a nice dry sample where the soil's not sticking anymore. If you're having difficulty determining the amount of sand content, you can put it on a white sheet of paper and just with your finger underneath bounce the sheet of paper. You will see the sand particles end up going into little piles like what you're seeing forming on this paper. The silt and clay, they do not, they stay strung out. Next step is moist cast test. So you're going to take a golf ball size sample of soil. Once again, removing the organics in the large clumps. Add water. That was way too wet, and that happens. If it gets too wet, you're not going to be able to make a ball, so just add more soil to your sample in order to dry it up a little bit. So we're going to keep kneading this soil in our hand, rolling it together until we get a nice golf ball size soil sample. If it's too wet or if it's too dry, that is going to affect the consistency and the outcome of this test. So I'm going to test it on my arm, and I do not want to see any soil or mud impressions left on my arm. So when it's that dry, you know you've got it right. And from there, the moist cast test is just to see how well it sticks together or how easily it falls apart. So just by rough handling, sticking your finger in it, that gives you a sense on how strong or how weak it is. Next step is the ribbon test. So with that same moist cast that you've just made, that golf ball size sample of soil, between your thumb and index finger, squeeze it, and you're going to see produce long, thin ribbons. Okay, depending on how much soil it is, these ones are shorter, and that's because there's a greater sand content in them. But that's what we're looking for, is these ribbons, and it's important to pay attention to how thick they are and how long they are. The shine test. Shine test only applies to clay soils. So you're going to take a sample, slide it across a piece of metal, it could be a shovel or anything steel, and the shine is how much sunlight reflects off of that. The feel test, this is where we're going to saturate the soil. So we've got our soil sample, really going to load up the water here so it's wet, and with your index finger just rub it around, rub the soil peds particles in around the soil in the moisture, and you're feeling for how gritty it is. So if it's a grittier mix, that indicates how much sand. If it's more of a floury mix, it tells us how much other silt or clay there may be. Now just get out and practice. Do it over and over with different soil samples, and you will master this.